I had a blast playing through this not-so-serious puzzle game called Tiny Brains, one of the more enjoyable co-op games I played recently. The developers at Spearhead Games seem to be taking some of that charm and bringing it over to Stories, the Path of Destinies. The game is presented like a bedtime story, being read by the classic witty voice actor telling you tales of the pirate fox. It's like an interactive audiobook with a buttload of charm.
His mother had never let him wave his sword around at home. He guessed he was still compensating for that.
Stories is going to be hard to explain, because I think what makes it so creative is what I would consider a spoiler. A tiny one. It totally caught me off guard when I realized how the game actually works. It changed my perspective of the game and shaped my experience moving forward. But with the game called Stories, it's hard not to talk about the story part even for a little bit. So if you want to come into this super fresh, then clog your ears for like a couple minutes. Stories lets you experience the story by letting you make choices that will affect the whole journey all the way to the ending. I'm not talking about making many decisions that would lead you to like a variation of the end. No, I mean choices that will change your whole journey. It's like starting at the trunk of the tree and following the different paths of the branches. Well, a miniature tree. I was expecting it to be a short story with multiple endings, and you can play through it once to get your sort of unique experience, when it's actually part of the game to keep replaying it until you understand enough of what's going on to make the right decisions and complete the game. I was pleasantly surprised by this. Sure, it's not a new concept, but it's special to see it in the form of a game. It gives you a real unique story all the way through, learning characters' backstory and motivations. And of course, it's always interesting to see how the same characters react in different situations. You can reach 25 different endings, but playing through the story more than 5 times, you can see what made it a creative idea starts to diminish the experience. Watering it down with a lot of repeating dialogue that you can't skip, or certain parts of the story not being communicated well enough, like in certain scenes the narrator talking about something that you're supposed to know but don't. Even in your second time through, it's established that the character and narrator knows it isn't your first time through the story, but a second later will repeat the same dialogue as if it's your first time, until you reach some major moments in the story. I know it might be a little nitpicky, but I'm a sucker for the little details. Plus, it's annoying when the narrator goes on and on about me making a wrong choice when we played through that decision moments ago, then later contradicts himself by totally being aware of our past decision. It doesn't take away from the satisfaction of going through all the choices to get the big picture in the end, but I'll be lying if it didn't make the road there a little bumpy. Like the way they handled traveling with companions. You don't actually see them. I mean, I get it, you're supposed to believe that they're traveling with you, but when they just appear in front of you for a cutscene just to be left behind and die in some cases, it kind of brings you out of it. I'd rather them just magically fade away after cutscenes, or even the old school Final Fantasy VII Dragon Ball Z Fusion. With all these branching paths, instead of 3D cutscenes, the story is told in a picture book. This is where you make your decisions and what transitions you from one level to the next. Your first time playing through these levels, you're gonna grudgingly walk past all these doors you can't open because you can't craft the right sword yet. But during your second, third, or fourth time through, you will have some of the required swords, giving multiple ways to complete the same level, which is useful since you're going to be playing them over while trying different choices. Repeating levels can get stale near the end, but before you explore every nook and cranny, you are opening up these other paths to get satisfying rewards. Other than leveling up from the extra fights to dump points into the skill tree, you can use these rewards to craft and upgrade swords, and also slot in gems that you get that add passive abilities. Some upgrades are not exactly clear on what you're getting and seem a little imbalanced with each other. You will dump points in what you would think would be useful and then question if your points should have been spent elsewhere. It took me a couple hours to figure out that you actually had to hold the magic button in order to strike an enemy with the sword's ability, but it's also depleting as I hold it, so the whole time I'm running around from enemy to enemy, I'm just wasting bar. I'm sorry, my mama taught me not to be wasteful, so I just end up not using it most of the time. Your basics are your slash, dash, and hook. You jump from enemy to enemy while dodging and countering attacks. The combat is a mixture of Batman, Fable, and just a little tiny small dash of Hyperlight Drifter. It's hard not to think about Hyperlight when I just played it, and Story's combat is just not as tight. Part of it is the camera. Sometimes you can't see the enemies that are going to attack you so you can counter. so you will die sometimes not knowing how. The hitboxes are not clean enough. Sometimes I get hit by the same enemy I'm attacking or swear I countered. I want the enemy's weapon to be in kissing distance before it hits me and messes up my combo. You know when you play a game and it just feels inconsistent? Like back in the days when you used to use the old trackball mouses? It feels a little like that sometimes. Hopefully, all this game needs is a visit to the doctors to get all patched up. But when it works, it's a satisfying challenge. They introduce many different enemies that add mechanic opportunities, like using your hook to drag a suicide bomber near a group of enemies, or tactically taking out healers and mages before they overwhelm you. And I also don't really understand why more games don't allow you to drag your sword on the ground and let the sparks just fly. Oh man, does it look cool. Stories gives off a very old school feeling in a time where doors magically opened by themselves and the story wasn't taken too seriously. It's a lighthearted chill game to play after coming home from school instead of doing your homework. It is definitely not as polished as it should be, but the charm of the game may win you over.
Where was the cake? He'd been promised cake. There was an inscription. Praise the sun.